If you're feeling extra stressed out or even fearful of what Trump and his crew have in store, that's understandable. But one thing to always keep in mind, this is not some relentlessly disciplined phalanx of soldiers, okay? This is a constantly conniving and backbiting group of folks, always trying to look out for themselves and to cash in, often turning on each other. And we're not, we're not even close to Inauguration Day. We've already got examples. Here's the latest example. According to the New York Times, Trump's legal team found evidence a top advisor asked for retainer fees from potential appointees in order to promote them for jobs in the new administration. The advisor is Boris Epshteyn. He's been close to Trump for years and was part of the alternate elector plot, actually currently under indictment in Arizona for that. Recently, he's been helping Trump with his cabinet picks. According to the Times, Trump's legal team started looking into Epshteyn after several people told Trump that Epshteyn was asking for money from people who were looking for appointments. Among those potential appointees, Scott Bessent, he's Trump's chosen pick for Treasury Secretary. According to the Review, Mr. Epshteyn met with Mr. Bessent in February at a time when it was widely known that he was interested in the Treasury post and proposed $30,000 to $40,000 a month to promote him around Mar-a-Lago. The Washington Post adds the report concluded that Epshteyn later asked Bessent to invest $10 million in a 3-on-3 basketball league. Why not? Sure. Boris Epshteyn's going to launch a 3-on-3 basketball league. Yesterday, Epshteyn released a statement and said, "I'm honored to work for President Trump and his team. These fake claims are false and defamatory and will not distract us from making America great again." This kind of thing is what we come to expect from members of Trump's team. It's baked in. As the Atlantic's Adam Schroer writes, quote, "The consistent theme here is that Trump advisors have a very clear authoritarian, discriminatory agenda, one that many Trump voters don't believe exists, or to the extent it does, will not harm them. That is remarkable, delusional, and frightening." And Adam Schroer, staff writer for The Atlantic, joins me now. I want to talk about your piece in a sec. First on this, and again, I should be clear, Epshteyn says this is made up, that he did no such thing. We know we have all sorts of examples of strange forms of influence peddling in the Trump circle through the many years that it's been there. There was accusations of people basically charging folks for pardon lobbying. It does seem to me that we will be getting a lot of this, Adam, in this administration, if nothing else.
Well, I mean, this is what happens when you surround yourself around with these types of people. But I think, as they say, the fish rots from the head. And Donald Trump, the New York Times did an article about all the different industries that Donald Trump had gone seeking financial support for during the election. I mean, he went to the oil and gas industry and was like, you're going to do so well under me that you should give me $1 billion. And this is one of the places in which the brand of Donald Trump outruns the reality of Donald Trump around his supporters. They're all convinced he's so rich that he can't be bought when he's literally the most for sale president that has ever held the office. And when you consider the corruption of 19th century politics, that's actually pretty extraordinary.
Yes. I mean, one of the things in corruption of 19th century politics is that you had politicians having rich donors buy them houses and buy them horse carriages and paying for everything for them. I mean, they were just completely in hock as a matter of, decades of the sort of worst forms of Gilded Age corruption. And it seems like we're headed towards something that surpasses that.
Well, I think Donald Trump is a 19th century American politician in a lot more ways than one.
That's a great point.
We don't have to go into all the details here. But, yes, I mean, he's someone who, has more or less explicitly said that he will do favors for industries that support him. And I think when you look at how he's going to run his government, you can expect that that's how he will use the powers of the presidency. And that's precisely the problem with elevating someone like Donald Trump to an office that has such tremendous power.
One of the things, one of the sort of themes I've been returning to a fair amount in the last few weeks since the election is a theme that was identified in 2004, particularly about the sort of ways that Republican politics, and particularly the Bush campaign, had kind of promised people one set of things they were voting for and then delivered something else when they got in office. And the biggest example is, we're going to be tough on the war on terror, and we're your representatives in this sort of culture war against the elitist liberals, and then we're going to privatize Social Security. And your piece is interesting because you're sort of identifying a parallel but similar tension in Trump's victory between how people that gave him the victory understand what they were voting for and what Trump seems intent on delivering them. Explain.
Well, I think one of the things that the conservative media propaganda apparatus was very effective at doing was crowding out sort of these stories about Trump that might indicate his intentions being something other than fighting for the common man. So people sort of kept this, like I said, the brand identity of Donald Trump outran the reality of Donald Trump among the people who ultimately supported him. And, they saw him a moderate on certain issues, particularly abortion, where, he is not one. And so I think there's this perception that he's going to come in and he's going to fix the economy. And, all these things, all these warnings about authoritarianism, that stuff can be taken less seriously because, he didn't actually succeed at that last time around. Somebody will stop him. And this is a place where I think the Democrats have sort of been a victim of their own success because they were successful in constraining Donald Trump the first time with very little help from the Republican Party. People assume that those guardrails are going to hold again. And I don't think they necessarily will.
You're right. Many people who voted for him believe he will do only the things they think are good, such as improve the economy, and none of the things they think are bad, such as act as a dictator, or if he does those bad things, the burden will be borne by other people, not them. This is the problem with a political movement rooted in deception and denial. Your own supporters may not like it when you end up doing the things you actually do. And I think, to me, this sort of Trump question, and again, I don't think it makes any sense to be like, haha, like you're getting your just desserts. Like, I think I would rather not see the country like harmed and hurt, first of all. But on the tariff thing, it's like he really did say this, and there really was this, across the board sense like, he's not serious. Even in sophisticated Wall Street types, sophisticated lobbyists. And maybe they know better than I, and maybe he isn't, and maybe he won't do it. But it does seem like that was a weird bet to place.
I think for all the unique qualities of Donald Trump as an individual, fundamentally, what we are being offered here is the traditional Republican deal of culture war nonsense, red meat for you, and then, giveaways to the richest people in the country. And I think the question is, if he actually does impose tariffs, if he actually does proceed with plans that, do in fact wreck the economy, I think that is going to break the spell for some people. But, if he doesn't, there's a lot of bad things that he could get away with.
Yeah. Also, the American economy is quite resilient, and there's a lot you can sort of do at the edges without, tanking it.
Collapsing everything.
I think, there's going to be a lot. There's a lot that can be done in terms of drama that is different than, everything crashes. Adam Serwer, as always, pleasure. Thank you.
Well, the Trump transition team is keeping secrets, escalating concerns among ethics experts. The president-elect's team has still not signed a legally required ethics pledge, promising to avoid conflicts of interest and impose limits on fundraising. As the New York Times reports that by keeping secret the names of donors who are funding his transition effort, revealing nothing about how much money it hopes to raise, who has contributed to the fund, or how it is spending its money. The Times also notes this is the first time a president-elect has ignored these restrictions. Joining me now, David Fahrenthold, investigative reporter for the New York Times, who's been digging into this issue. So why, among the people who you're talking to, is this delay or maybe refusal provoking so much alarm?
Well, this is a break from tradition, as you said, and it means that the people who are funding Trump's transition, people who are helping him find staff, find right policies, get ready for this to take over in power, those people's names are going to be secret. We're never going to learn who they were, what amounts they gave, or so that means we won't be able to later on figure out what they might want in return from the Trump administration. If some of these folks come back later and want favors, want exemptions from tariffs, things like that, we won't know that they had an in with Trump that started even before he took office.
So quid pro quo, no way to figure that out. Is there any indication, David, that progress is being made toward getting this agreement signed?
No, what the Trump administration or the Trump transition told us was that they were considering signing these things. There's a whole suite of agreements that incoming presidents are supposed to sign with the outgoing president. Other ones cover security clearances, access to intelligence information, and there's this one that then covers the funding for the transition. We think it's more likely that they will sign the other agreements, the ones that deal with intelligence sharing, and that it's unlikely they will share this one. They will sign this one, but they could change their mind.
So let me ask you about that, because you do report the Trump transition team hasn't signed that memorandum yet that outlines how appointees and other staff members do gain physical access to federal agencies, to classified information before Inauguration Day. What challenges does that pose?
Well, it means that you're, not only not going to know the buildings or know the people, but the people who are coming in to lead these agencies aren't going to really understand anything about them. And that's especially important when we're talking about intelligence briefings. Remember, way back in the 9/11 Commission report, they said one factor in the Bush administration, not being ready for the threat that terrorism posed, was because there had been that long delay of recounts in Florida. And so they weren't able to start the transition period until later. Now we have sort of a voluntary choice not to start that access to intelligence that could put these folks behind when they come in, take over, and try to absorb it all at once.
David Fahrenthold, always great to read your reporting and have you on the program. Thank you.
In stacking his cabinet, Donald Trump is proving that birds of a feather flock together. The man found liable for sexual abuse, facing accusations of sexual assault or sexual misconduct from at least 18 women, has chosen multiple nominees facing allegations of misconduct themselves. There's Donald Trump's nominee for Defense Secretary, Fox News host Pete Hegseth. He says he was fully cleared of sexual assault allegations, a claim repeated by his supporters. Here's Oklahoma Senator Markwayne Mullin over the weekend.
He wasn't charged. He wasn't even kind of charged in this. There was no crime committed. The police dropped everything. It's what's unfortunate in today's world. You can be accused of anything, and then especially if it's something like this, you're automatically assumed to be guilty. If you read the police report from cover to cover, which I have, and I know every reporter has too, it is clear there was nothing there. There was clear that there was no crime committed, and so that doesn't prevent Pete from moving forward in this.
As friend of this show, Barbara McQuaid notes, quote, the absence of charges is not the same as being cleared, a term that suggests a finding of actual innocence. And the Washington Post sums it up like this, quote, the allegation was investigated by local authorities who didn't press charges. The accuser later threatened legal action. Hegseth paid her, and she signed a non-disclosure agreement, according to his attorney. Hegseth's nomination comes, though, after years of scrutiny for the Department of Defense for failing to take the problem of sexual assault in the military seriously enough. And then there's Robert F. Kennedy, Jr. He, of course, has been tapped to lead the Department of Health and Human Services. Wall Street Journal on him reports this, quote, senators from both parties said they expect Kennedy will face questions about alleged incidents from years ago that recently have drawn attention. Kennedy has been accused of sexual assault in the late 90s by a woman who is willing to testify before the Senate. Kennedy has said he is, quote, not a church boy. That is one way to put it. According to the Wall Street Journal, Kennedy's accuser, Eliza Cooney, says this, that she was 23 years old when she began working as an intern at the law clinic Kennedy helped lead and as a babysitter on the weekends for his family while living with them. She recalled that one day while other members of the family were not home, Kennedy came up behind her in a pantry. He put his hands on her hips and slid them up to the side of her breasts. Cooney froze. A worker at the house came in and interrupted the scene, giving Cooney the chance to exit, end quote. That was just one of many sexual advances Kennedy made, according to Cooney. Kennedy says he has no memory of that incident and apologized to Cooney over the summer by text, a message that Cooney says was disingenuous. Even one of the few women who has been nominated to Trump's cabinet, she's named Linda McMahon. She's been tapped to lead the Department of Education, is herself embroiled in scandal. On her, the Washington Post reports this, that McMahon faces a lawsuit from 5 plaintiffs who helped set up WWE events as teenagers. They allege that Linda McMahon and her husband Vince McMahon, the WWE co-founder, knew that the then teens were being sexually abused by high-ranking WWE employees. An attorney for McMahon says that the lawsuit is baseless. All of this is to say nothing of the man Trump had tapped to be the country's chief law enforcement officer. We are, of course, talking about Matt Gaetz, now of Cameo fame. Even though he denied all wrongdoing, Gaetz withdrew his nomination for Attorney General more than an hour before news broke that a woman had 2 sexual encounters with Matt Gaetz when she was 17. And intrepid reporting in the New York Times revealed that the Justice Department had uncovered a web of payments to people who participated in what the Times describes as, quote, drug-fueled sex parties, end quote, including women who say he hired them for sex. Matt Gaetz took himself out of the running, but his nomination by Trump is clearly part of a pattern. As Elise Hogue writes in The Bulwark today, it's part of a backlash to the Me Too movement that was a defining moment in the first Trump term. Quote, in that light, the charges against Hegseth and his ilk are a feature, not a bug, to this president looking to put the women who disrupted his first term in their place. With these nominations, Trump's message is abundantly clear. Women are meant to be scared, and men are meant to pick a side. It's where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Former chairman of the RNC, now co-host of MSNBC's The Weekend, Michael Steele is here. Plus, former Democratic Senator and MSNBC political analyst Claire McCaskill is back. And with me at the table, NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard's here. Vaughn, serious question. Are they trying to populate the cabinet with men accused of sexual misconduct?
When you're looking at the individuals who are being tapped for these roles here, you're seeing individuals that fit that profile. And I think that it is the ultimate American question in 2024 is just how much are Americans willing to ignore to justify the means to which people believe that these individuals are conveyor belts for the policies and the types of governance that they want. And if people view RFK and the stories and the allegations that have been levied against him, and they acknowledge that that was Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s past and that that is who the man is, but if at the same time they also believe that he's going to go in there and fundamentally change the FDA and the CDC, which one is more important to you? And I think Americans, by and large, by selecting Donald Trump and by extension, people like RFK Jr. or a Pete Hegseth or a Matt Gaetz, I think that they made that decision clear this month.
Well, I guess let me just play devil's advocate here. And I guess we can debate who is the devil's advocate here. But if you win, and I think in Trump's view, winning the popular vote is probably as meaningful to him, right, as his electoral victory. Why abandon the first term brand of the best people and hire, by any objective analysis, some of the worst people?
It's a good question. I think when you look at the justification of what Pete Hegseth can bring to the table, you have somebody here who fits a profile for Donald Trump, who plays that role of somebody who is good on TV, who can effectuate that idea of what masculinity and what strength in a military general should look like. I mean, he tried to make that pitch for the likes of James Mattis, back 8 years ago, I remember, right after he was elected. This go around, though, I think that you see him turning to people like Mehmet Oz, people that have a pedigree on their TV history here, and as a means that I think overcomes perhaps what may be their resume deficits, right? And that's, I think, also why just in the last few minutes, we have the memorandum of understanding that was just signed by the Trump administration with the GSA, in which they explicitly say that they are going to bypass the government and the FBI background checks, because I think to a great extent, I think that it's clearly less of a priority than the other bona fides and the other presentation and with the other qualities that Donald Trump's believed these individuals bring to his administration.
I mean, I was vetted when I worked in the White House, and the reason you're investigated isn't to cast anyone out. It's to make sure that you're not a target for blackmail by a foreign government. I mean, is there a process that will replace the background investigation?
Potentially when they take over the FBI, right? Chris Wray is supposed to, his 10-year term ends
Trump's
in
pick.
2027, Trump's pick. His term is supposed to end in 2027, but our reporting suggests that either Chris Wray is expecting to be fired or will step aside under the assumption that he's going to be fired. And at that point, you put in somebody like a Kash Patel or somebody that could be confirmed. And at that point, does the FBI under Donald Trump then do those background checks that they are choosing not to go forward with now? I think that that's why, you know, Tulsi Gabbard may run into issues with Republicans on Capitol Hill, confirming her out of questions of what may be in her FBI background checks. And so I think that this is that moment here where I think the Trump administration is going to face, I think, questions up on Capitol Hill in this much of the way that Matt Gaetz did. But are people like Mitch McConnell, are people like Bill Cassidy, Murkowski, Collins, are they going to stand up and essentially act as the FBI almost to a certain extent in telling the American public or making the demands that there is a greater sense of transparency outside of reporting and understandings that come out of police reports like in Monterey, California, that only came after Donald Trump nominated Pete Hegseth to take over the Pentagon.
A Democratic Congressman of New York, Gregory Meeks. He's a ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, thank you for your time this morning. Let's pick up that conversation. Someone who understands Washington so well, who's been there for a minute and sees the normal process by which people are nominated, by which they are vetted, the type of people, the qualifications typically required to be elevated to some of the positions that Donald Trump has made his choices for. What do you make of this round of cabinet picks from Donald Trump so far?
It is an absolute failure and danger to our national security and our interests. Look, just basically, I represent an airport, JFK Airport in New York. You can't get a job at the airport without a background check. And to try to get individuals in who will have our most important information, our national security interests, our national security data, and they don't go through a background check, is a danger to the United States of America. And why? Because when you look at, especially as rapid as this president has been putting these individuals in, he clearly has not done any background check or vetting of any of them. Why? Because, or even looking at a resume. All he does is to see if, in fact, they will be loyal to who? Not the United States of America, but to Donald J. Trump. And, you know, and I hear a lot of my Republican colleagues say, oh, he was there before, and so therefore he knows what he wants. Well, I agree with that. He knows he does not want anyone that is pledged to the United States of America because, like before, when he had General Mattis or General Kelly, and even, you know, you look at anybody that was around him previously that covered national defense issues and international issues, none of them supported him in this election. There's a reason for that. In fact, all of them said that he should not be near the White House again. And so he wants to appoint people now, and he's putting people in whose one thing and only thing that he cares about is pledge allegiance to Donald J. Trump and do what I tell you to do, not to the United States of America.
So, Congressman, let's dive into some of these picks. You just raised concerns about some of the national security team the president-elect has nominated, of Tulsi Gabbard, for instance. Pete Hegseth have gotten real scrutiny from some of your colleagues. But there's another piece of this, too. We know that during the campaign, Donald Trump did his very best to distance himself from Project 2025, that conservative blueprint, that plan for action were he to win. But now that he has one, he seems to be re-embracing it, including the architect of Project 2025 to head his budget office.
Why does that surprise us? You know, we said all along that that's what he's going to do. And we're going to be having to deal with Project 2025 for 4 years because that's who he is. All of the individuals who put that project together were individuals that worked with Trump in the past. And now their plan is to implement it. So it doesn't surprise me at all. Look, Donald Trump won this election for one reason. It's the economy. You know, and we did not come strong enough for people to feel that we understood their problems, the cost of groceries. You know, I felt it. And I just thought about my father, for example, when I grew up in public housing. You know, when we had financial crises, he was worried about putting food on the table. Everything else was not being considered. There was one thing in his mind. How was he going to feed his family? We did not get that message over that to our people, that we feel the problems that they have. You look at any poll, national security was at the bottom of the list. And sometimes because that's who I do, and as far as the ranking member on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and I talk about it, but I can see people glassing over when I talk about it. But that's what we're going to have to deal with now, the state of our country and our institutions. He is making a joke of the institutions of the United States of America. Who we are, really, our guts of a country, what makes us different than most, and all the democratic countries, is the institutions. And that's what he wants to destroy, the institutions. We and the founding fathers, for a reason, said we don't want a king. We don't want a dictator. But what Donald Trump wants to do, just check it out, it's facts. He wants to emulate Vladimir Putin or Viktor Orban. These are individuals who, if you go against them, some of them in Russia, they fall out of the window. So that is what we're dealing with here. And there's another reason. Let me tell you, J.D. Vance, he's the one that said that Trump was like, our Hitler, etc. And I think the reason why he said that was Hitler was elected democratically. Democratically. So it's not Greg Meeks that said that. So they know what they did, what the deal is. And it's going to be up to the Republican senators and the Republicans in the House to stand up and not to be complicit with the moves and the actions of Donald J. Trump.
Congressman, looking at what's coming up quickly here, it looks like to me we've got a crash coming on funding the government. And obviously the defense reauthorization. Both of those have to be done before the end of the year. What's going on inside the rooms of Congress right now? What's going to happen here? Is there going to be a short-term CR? And how do you envision this spending stuff going with, you got Russell Vought, who says we're going to eliminate all kinds of government. And like Elon Musk says we're going to cut 75% of the employees. And then you got Donald Trump pledging that we're going to not tax anything. How is this all going to play out at the first of the year when they have to reconcile the deficits with what Trump wants to do with what some of the conservative Republicans want to do?
It's going to be, in a simple word, a disaster. We're headed for a disaster when you just look at all of those things. Right now, we can't get any top-line agreement. So, yes, we're probably going to be headed to a CR. They're trying to hold off, don't really want to negotiate, on the House side with Hakeem Jeffries and Rosa DeLauro, who's head of our Appropriations Committee, because they want to try to wait till after January 20th, where they can go on to their disastrous, look, they're putting in place when we start to talk about the average everyday person. It's a club of billionaires who look to reduce jobs so that they can make more money for themselves. And that's the direction of which this new administration that will come in is moving forward. It's the same thing because we saw it before. You starve the people so that there is a greater amount of money for the wealthy. You look at the wealth disparity in America, it continues to grow, and it will grow even faster under the plans of Donald J. Trump. People have forgotten because of and in a large part, when you talk about the economy, was directly related to the pandemic. But people have forgotten the chaos and the mess that was Donald J. Trump's first administration. And it's going to be that on steroids coming into 2025, 2026.
Congressman Meeks, I want to go back to a point you were making a few minutes ago about the election. We're 3 weeks now removed from Election Day. There have been so many after-action reports, post-mortems, analysis of what happened on Election Day. And you've been very outspoken about what you believe happened, because this was not just a story about white men supporting Donald Trump. It was across, as you know, even in your district in Queens, across race and gender. It was Black Americans, it was Asian Americans, it was Latino Americans who moved in the direction of Donald Trump. He got 30% of the vote in Queens. So he's in New York City, 37% of the vote in Queens. So what is your message to the party more broadly about the trends you're seeing, just even in your own district, that may tell us something about where the country moved on Election Day? Again, you got to look behind the numbers. Those numbers clearly indicated two things. People elected Donald Trump for two reasons. The economy, because when they went to the store, they wasn't looking at the stock market or anything of that nature. When they went to the store, the price for food was more than they could afford.
And so you saw people, going with non-named milk and cheese and things of that nature. So that was a problem, and immigration, because in New York you had Governor Abbott of Texas, who continually sent migrants to New York unannounced, without anything. So that's what they saw. But if you look underneath those numbers, you'll see, thanks to Hakeem Jeffries and Governor Hochul, that we won seats in New York. We didn't lose seats in New York. We won 3 seats. We turned 3 congressional seats in New York. We won every Democratic seat, even below hand. So it wasn't a complete washout. In fact, when we go back to Washington, D.C., there will be more Democrats in the 219th Congress than there were in the 119th Congress than there was in the 118th Congress. So yes, we've got to make sure that we are taking care of our people so that they can understand that we are concerned and focused on their everyday life and their well-being. But I think that you could also see New York and California, where we had lost seats previously. We won those seats back. It's going to be a 1 or 2 vote difference in the House of Representatives when we get back. It changes things. So we've got to talk to the people where they are. And we need to do more of that starting now, not waiting to an election. That's important, that we are going to talk to the people where they are and let them know that we feel them. As I said before, I think of my dad when he went to the polls, finally after he had the right to vote. He made those decisions based upon who helped him put food on the table, and we've got to make sure we're focused on that. I'll just say this also. If you look, because internationally, every leadership that was in place during the pandemic, whether it was conservative or whether it was progressive, lost, because all around the world, they were concerned about the cost of food and goods, and so therefore they were out. Who's the quickest to turn around? This doesn't make a difference to people, and particularly in the campaign, but whose economy rebounded the quickest and the fastest? The United States of America, because this is still the greatest country this planet has ever seen, and we don't need to go back to old politics and old situations, what concerns me. Look, we're here now for the first time. It used to be we Democrats and Republicans came together. And I just was reading a quote of Richard Nixon, for example, that's now coming true. He says, if you're the president of the United States and you commit it's not a crime, no matter what you do, long as you're the president of the United States. And that's the message that is being sent right now, that if you're the president of the United States, as Donald Trump has said, he could walk down the street, shoot somebody, but if he's the president, he will not get indicted, etc. That's where we are now. So the focus will be, what will my Republican colleagues do? What will the senators do, Republican senators? What will the Republican members of the House do? Will they be complicit with the acts of Donald Trump, or will they hold him accountable for those things that he's doing and try to destroy the institutions of the United States of America?
Not much track record of them holding him accountable. We'll see if they cross him on some of these choices he's made for cabinet picks. Ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Democratic Congressman Gregory Meeks of New York. Great conversation this morning.
Other picks are also creating a lot of headlines, and Pete Hegseth, for one, has come under intense scrutiny since Trump unexpectedly picked the former Fox News host to lead the Pentagon. Last week, police in Monterey, California, released a report from 2017 in which a woman accused Hegseth of sexual assault. Hegseth, who has denied the allegations, was never charged with a crime. In 2020, while serving in the D.C. National Guard, Hegseth, a combat veteran, was pulled from active duty before his unit was to be deployed to protect the Capitol on January 6th. Because National Guard leadership grew concerned about pictures of Hegseth on social media that showed him having a tattoo that's been linked to a Christian nationalist group. Hegseth has also come under scrutiny for his recent comments about women in combat, and he has a history of making anti-Muslim comments. Joining us now, staff writer at The Atlantic, Jonathan Chait. His latest piece focuses on Hegseth and deems him Donald Trump's most dangerous cabinet pick. Jonathan, thank you for joining us this morning. I'll put it to you simply. What makes him more dangerous than the rest?
What makes him so dangerous is that he's the embodiment of Donald Trump's unfulfilled first-term ambition of having a defense secretary who's willing to use American troops to employ violence against peaceful protesters. Trump demanded this of his defense secretaries during his first term, and those secretaries refused on principle. But Hegseth is obviously very, very enthusiastic about this goal and broadly shares Trump's worldview toward the American left, which he just regards as indistinguishable from foreign enemies.
Really, that Donald Trump would name Hegseth as his nominee. But tell me what you think Republicans in the Senate are going to do with this. Will they demand a fuller background investigation? Will someone like Joni Ernst herself, a combat veteran, stand up? What do we think Mitch McConnell will do now that he'll be freed from the responsibilities of leadership? What do you see happening in the Senate?
That's a really good question, because Hegseth is much more in line with the traditional Republican establishment than someone like Matt Gaetz, who just had so many enemies within the Republican Party that they personally loathed him and also distrusted him. Hegseth used to be a more mainline neoconservative Republican hawk, but interestingly, he sort of changed his views at the same time Trump was changing his views. Hegseth went from someone who was attacking Democrats for betraying the country in Iraq to someone who shared Trump's belief that the Iraq War had been a mistake. But he just became even more intensely partisan in his thinking and is held on to this belief that the Democrats are a threat to America and have to be suppressed. I think this view really comes through clearly if you pay close attention to what he's written in his past 3 books, which is what I did to ground myself in this article.
Hey, Jonathan, how much concern is there kind of in the national security defense establishment about Hegseth's views in, the Afghanistan, the folks that are around for the Afghanistan pullout, changing the importance of DEI, all of those kinds of things that he's talked about? Do they actually believe he's going to do them? Or is it possible that, the fact that he hasn't ever controlled or been in charge of an organization this big, that will take up a lot of his time? Or are they worried that he's going to do the things that he said he's going to do?
It's a great question. He claims the military has been eviscerated because of its focus on DEI and allowing women into combat roles. But it seems to be that one of Trump's first steps of kicking transgender members of the military out of disparaging or even taking women out of combat roles is going to reduce the combat capability of the military. And I'd further argue that there's a kind of irony here, which is that Hegseth attacks the DEI policies in the military for promoting unqualified, or what he believes are unqualified, minorities into leadership roles in the military. But he's the least qualified defense secretary in history. He has none of the bureaucratic experience that anyone has ever brought into this role before. So his views on merit seem to be pretty inconsistent with his own promotions.
The Atlantic's Jonathan Chait, thank you so much. His piece on Pete Hegseth is online now. And David Frum, certainly questions are surrounding the Hegseth choice. Now that Matt Gaetz has withdrawn, Hegseth seems to be getting the most scrutiny from Republican senators. Let's get your take, though, as to whether you do think he is perhaps the most dangerous cabinet selection or Trump selection left, or perhaps is it Tulsi Gabbard, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? You've got quite a few choices.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is kind of a lunatic and believes things that will expose more people to sickness and death. On the other hand, he's at top of a giant bureaucracy where he doesn't have a lot of discretionary authority. Tulsi Gabbard, just by opening her mouth, can betray secrets to one of the many dictators she is very friendly with, suspiciously friendly with. She's very dangerous. I think Hegseth's role would be this. The big surprise for Donald Trump about the military when he arrived in office was he thought, hey, I'm a big violent bully. Generals are big violent bullies. Generals will like me. And then he was astonished to discover that actually the senior ranks of the American military are full of people who realize allies are an asset, not a liability. They've lived abroad. They often speak foreign languages. They are highly sophisticated about America's interests in the world. And he did not find allies among the 4 stars and the 3 stars. So one of the things that if he has it to do all over again, you might imagine that Donald Trump would want to do is start hunting among the colonels and the 1 stars for MAGA types he can promote to 3-star and 4-star authority. And that's where a Secretary of Defense, a like-minded one, can be very helpful. Hegseth does not have to be an administrative genius. He doesn't have to be even ordinarily smart to be able to figure out which of the colonels and 1 stars, like Trump, will do his bidding and should be fast-tracked to higher rank where they can hold important commands, where they can do damage to the security of the United States and the democratic institutions of the United States. I would be worried about his role in promotions.
All right, we're watching for that. So, David, let's turn now to your recent piece in The Atlantic, in which you write this. Perhaps Americans require, every once in a while, to be jolted out of the complacency learned from their mostly fortunate history. The nation that ratified the 13th Amendment in 1865 was, in important ways, the same one that enacted the Fugitive Slave Act in 1850. The nation that generously sent Marshall Plan aid after the Second World War was compensating for the myopic selfishness of the Neutrality Acts before the war. Americans can take pride in their national story because they have chosen rightly more often than they have chosen wrongly. But the wrong choices are part of the story, too. And the wrong choice has been made again now. So, David, my question for you, my inevitable question to you is, those examples we just cited are moments when the United States, in your view, made the wrong choice and then corrected itself, found itself back to where it needed to be, made the right decision. Do you have confidence that the country will do so again?
I have hope. Isn't that enough? To say you're confident means that you think of the future as something that exists and that you can make statements about. I think those people in the United States who were born after the Great Depression, the Second World War, who grew up in the years when the country became more democratic and the years of civil rights and the inclusion of women and the extraordinary prosperity after the war, have lived an amazingly fortunate story, maybe the most fortunate story of any human beings in the history of the human race. So there's a kind of tendency to think that's the way it always has to be, and to not understand there are forks in the road where important decisions were made or not made. We have to get back onto the right track. Nothing is promised and nothing is guaranteed. But maybe, I know a lot of people who watch networks like this one are kind of demoralized right now. Maybe the way to think about this is to say, along with whatever you feel about the path the country's on, you personally have also been given an opportunity to be an important part of American history and to be part of the story of pulling the country back onto the path it needs to be on in the way that people before you have had. When I talk to youth groups, I often say, just be grateful to be alive at a time when your country needs you, because it needs you now.
The Atlantic's David Frum, thank you very much. We'll be reading his new piece online now. And Susan Page, let's ask you, do you agree with David that the national story here is one of eventually making the right decision? And do you think it will again?
Well, absolutely. I mean, our nation has made a series of decisions that don't stand up to the witness of history, but then done things that are exactly right and that we're proud of and that we say is what makes us Americans. But I am struck, I think, by the discouragement that you see among Democrats and those who opposed Donald Trump. Now, the contrast with 2016 is so striking. Then we had all these protests going on and declarations of defiance and the Women's March. And now you find, I think, people who did not vote for Donald Trump for president. It's not clear to me what their reaction is. I think you see a kind of retreat from the public debate, at least for a while. And so that is one of the big challenges, it seems to me, we're going to face as a nation and the Trump opposition will face, which is how to engage people in a productive way about the course forward. Now, it's possible that Donald Trump will help. He may do. He was elected for some reasons, including concern about the economy and chaos in the world. But he was not elected for some of the things he says he's going to do, and that may give his opponents a toehold. But this does seem like a sort of dispirited moment, I think, for those who did not support him.
You could not agree more, Susan. That's a conversation I've had with a lot of people in the last couple of weeks. People are depressed, they're dispirited. What could jolt them? The answer, many have said to me, would be if he does follow through with the mass deportations plan, if people are pulled from their home, neighbors, friends are suddenly taken from their homes and being sent over, out of this country, that might be the moment that sparks the protests again. We shall have to see in the weeks ahead. That was a really important conversation. My gratitude to all involved. It's time now.